Better? Okay, I'm going to use the microphone then. Okay, so that's me. I'm Patrick. Welcome. Thanks so much for coming. I'm going to speak, I guess I spoke, the original title we chatted about for this was The Cosplay Revolution, which is something that I'm working on. It's a book project about cosplay and the importance of cosplay in the world. And what I've been talking about, though, is that why it's such a big revolution and why it's important is that for me, I believe it's the most important movement in creative work in the world. So that's what I'm going to talk about a bit. So let's see if I can get this going. There we go. So I just want to start by saying thank you to the people that organize this. It's an extraordinary event in our city, and it's made my life way better because I just like the fact that this happens in our city, and it seems to be getting bigger every single year, and I hope that eventually we just never stop and we just do this 365 days a year. So seriously though, wouldn't it be much better to be here? It would be great. Anyway, so thank you to everyone. Okay, so first I'll give you the audience warning, the standard audience warning. I don't use any profanity, but I am an academic, and so as a result of that, I speak about studies and information and data and things like that, and so you should be aware of that. That's kind of my whole life. And the thing that makes it unique to be an academic is that I know that I'm really boring, and I have no plans to get any better at all. Okay, so here's what I'll try and talk about. I'm going to try and talk fast because I think what would be really cool is if we could talk, because I'd love to hear what you think about cosplay and what you think some of the exciting new developments are and some of the things that maybe I'm missing in the type of work that I'm doing. So I'll try and I'm just going to, because I'm an academic, I'm going to talk about why I think cosplay matters in like the whole huge historical thing of the world, because that's kind of like what academics do. And eventually I'll get to the point and then I'll ask you for questions and hopefully we can chat a bit about cosplay. Okay, so. But I want to make sure that I'm really quite clear. When I say that I believe that cosplay is the most important artistic contribution that's being made, you got to understand I work in a school for creative and performing arts. I believe that this is of central importance to society. So it's fun, it's awesome, it's amazing, but I also think it's really incredibly important. Here's why. So let's take a look at what our world is like right now. Again, academic, I like to do this sort of context thing. Our world is a world of the brain right now. We are obsessed with how to make our brains better, more powerful, how to sort of get rid of problems with the brain, etc. You can't pick up a newspaper or go online without seeing sort of information about the brain every single day. So we're all trying to do different sort of brain stuff. The next thing is, of course, that we're in the digital age. We're way past the digital age. In fact, the digital revolution happened in the last generation. People that talk about it as something new are wrong. The folks who ran the digital revolution are dead or retired. And so it has already happened, and that's a major change because it's allowed people to integrate narrative and to trade stuff online and to have sort of, you can end up buying sort of costume elements through various sort of online things that you just wouldn't have had access to before. So that's huge. The next thing is that sort of the huge, I noticed this year there's a campaign in the Expo that's about, you know, the cosplay is not, or costume is not consent. We live in an age where we are paying far better attention to justice and equality for all people than we have in the past. We still have lots of work to do, but we live in a society that is far more equitable. And one of the things we see in cosplay is it's, in many ways, people talk about being dominated by women, in fact. So, okay. We also still live on this big blue ball. But what it means is that we live globally. And so what has happened inside of cosplay that hasn't happened in a lot of other narrative forms is the blending of narrative traditions from around the world. So that's something that's quite fascinating to me. Okay, and then of course there's this generation. These are my students. These are the people that I'm working with. And amongst these types of folks, their primary engagement with stuff, if they're going to be doing creative work, often is cosplay. You sort of, when I ask the groups that I work with, that's sort of the most popular sort of growing form of work that they're sort of dealing with. Okay, so, but the thing is that we also live in a time when people are freaking out. People are really, really scared. And the reason for this is quite simple. The whole world is changing incredibly fast, and that freaks people out. We're becoming more global, we're becoming more sort of LinkedIn, all these types of things. Well, what happens when that happens? Throughout all cultures in the world and throughout all time, people have looked for heroes. And so what happens is we turn to our narrative traditions. We turn to stories and we look for heroes, we look for villains. These are the ways that we examine how the world works. And so when people look at different times in history, you look at who were their heroes then and how did people engage with those heroes. We tell stories about heroes that we want to see replicated by young people and by people in our society. So right now, at a time when people are freaking out about sort of global this and global that, it's not surprising that a whole series of people are actually engaging with becoming heroes in sort of our daily life. Okay, so here's the quick summary in case you don't want to listen to me for the rest of the time. We're born in interesting times, basically, so what do? If we're born in this sort of crazy, wild time when everything is changing, and believe me, this is the most exciting time in the history of the world. Everything has changed more than it's ever changed before in terms of human communication, in terms of politics, in terms of story. Everything has changed more than anything before. And along with that, television, movies, books, the internet, etc., ad infinitum. And so why I got involved in cosplay stuff is that I had all these friends that are working at, at the BAM Center and all the theaters across the country and in the States and in England, and they're saying, oh, film and television and movies are not doing very well. No one is really interested in all of this stuff anymore. And I work at the University of Calgary, and they have a thing there called OdaFest, and I pointed out the window and said, yeah, there's like 2,000 people out there in costume running around. I think that people are really still very interested in performance, and that what's happened is that people have taken performance over. So it's been a revolution in narrative. Okay, here's the answer of what you can do is in cosplay it becomes about the individual, right? The thing that's so extraordinarily impressive to me about cosplay is it's not just that it takes a pretty sensitive and intelligent individual to engage with a narrative, like whatever story happens to inspire you, but then so much of this work is then DIY. It's incredibly inspiring to me. I mean, I work with professionals that do this all the time, and I'm walking along the aisle here to get my sort of badge, which took me 9 hours. Every year I get lost, I don't know why. But anyways, and I see people working on costumes, stalking each other, commenting on costumes, getting people to sort of do sort of little things to help them with parts of their costumes. That's extraordinary. That's art happening all over the place. That's extraordinary creativity happening all over the place, and a great sense of community. So I love that about it. Okay, so what's the past all about? I'll go fast on this because I want to get to us sort of talking. The past is these guys, Plato and Aristotle. You know I'm an academic. We're actually, we always have to mention Plato and Aristotle if we want to keep our jobs at the university. What they did is that they worked at a time when people looked and they said that what has to happen is people have to perform heroes and villains in order for society to heal. That the most important thing that you can do for children, the most important thing you can do for society, the most important thing you can do for your fellow human beings is to perform these types of stories. And so that's what they did, and they made it mandatory to go and participate in stories and things like that. So we took that, and of course we made it into kind of an industry, and over the last sort of number of years it became sort of locked down. And it became sort of part of this whole idea that what you needed to do was I would kind of do art, you would sit there quietly, you would consume my art, you would applaud for me, I would say thank you very much underlings and now go away. But that's not very satisfying, and it's not very satisfying for really creative people. And so the ancient Greeks had talked about know thyself was only one part, that sort of separated out thing. Their big thing was you need to become the hero that you want to be. You need to explore that because it's a type of research as well. Become a villain, become a hero, become different types of characters to see what it feels like and to see how people react to you. It makes you smarter, besides the fact that it's amazing and that it's creative and wonderful. So here's the sort of present moment that we find ourselves in. This is kind of the new age, and everybody is sort of worried that people are going to be caught up inside of texting and things like this. Of course, texting is actually falling in popularity. Facebook is falling in popularity. These things, they come on sort of stream, and early on we get loads of adopters, but what isn't changing is individuals wanting to have their own creative lives and to do sort of great, incredible sort of artistic things. Now the difficulty is that this is the result. The grumpy old people like me, we get terrified by this because we're like, well, hang on a second. I mean, the symphony sits there, they play, the theater, we do this, the movie does this, and you all just sit there and stay quiet. It becomes really, really challenging when tens of thousands of people take over the city dressed as various types of characters. It's completely out of control. It's also way more creative and way more interesting, and it's like the first time, like for this down here, and then when OdaFest happens on campus at U of C, I feel totally at home because I deal with people in costume all the time, and so I walk around and I see all that. It's magnificent. Like I say, we'd actually be better off if we stayed in costume all year round. Okay, so the future. What's it look like? Why are you going to save the world? Well, basically, we now understand that the sort of complex nature of society is that who you are actually connects to what you do. So if you want to be smarter, you need to do something other than sitting still. And so dressing up, building costumes, engaging with narrative, and heading out into the world is actually going to make you smarter. So I think that every day that you're playing cosplay, you're getting smarter, you're getting more dynamic, you're getting more creative. I think that this whole notion of sort of computational complexity is teaching us a lot of different things, and we're changing the world based on it. But what we're really noticing is that integrating with people and integrating with complex narrative is what sort of achieves the sort of great sort of discoveries and types of things. And as we come to terms with artificial intelligence, we also need to come to terms with what it means to be human. Because I love computers a lot, but I'm not going to cuddle up with one at night. Well, I guess sometimes I do cuddle up with one at night, but that's a weird thing. But in general, we need to also discover what is it that's most powerful about us as human beings. And since the dawn of time, in every part of this world, what it's been is our heroes. Which heroes do we have? What movies are you seeing right now? You know that the reason that there's so many zombie films is that people are worried that we're becoming zombified. You know that why there are so many movies about artificial intelligence is that people are terrified that artificial intelligence will take over. What they should be terrified of is that recent Johnny Depp film, which was really disappointing. But anyways, it was really disappointing. It was beautiful, but the concept was fine, but 10 minutes in and I'm done. Anyways, the other thing is that we need to sort of come to terms with is that as this technological change happens, we still have a long way to go in sort of treating each other as equals. And so we get this kind of nostalgia. This is the grumpy old man effect, right? Where it's like, whoa, what I really like is when it was back in the old day, right? So the Mad Men show, it's like cool and everything, but it's like, wasn't it awesome back then? You mean with all of the racism and sexism and alcoholism? Yeah, that's terrific. Let's go back to that. So no, I mean, these types of things are going to come up as responses to what's going on. So the argument is that the cosplay generation, that the revolution now is a group of people that are completely self-obsessed. I think that's fundamentally incorrect. There's this notion of what's called the entitlement generation. I think it's really easy to say that you're entitled if you don't do anything. But if you've got people that are building costume, engaging with narrative, heading out into the public, going to meetings and that type of stuff, what you've got is you've got an explosion of creativity that no one is talking about. I mean, we're all talking about it. But out in society, people are saying, how do we get more creative? Well, it's already happening, right? It's already sort of embedded inside of cosplay. And so you end up with the beginnings of cosplay. And I'm sorry, I didn't know what slide to pick. I was going to pick like pictures from all around here, but then I'm like, somebody doesn't want to use their picture, so I sort of don't want to offend anybody by which pictures I pick. But inside of cosplay, one of the things that we know in all the studies that we've done is it ends up sort of completely changing your character who you cosplay as. When you are in costume, you behave differently. Your language set works differently and your brain fires in a different way. So what goes on is, and I work in performance, so all I'm kind of interested in is how can I make you a better performer? And if I can make your brain way stronger, that's kind of a good day for me. And I can make your brain way stronger if what you do is you play different types of characters because you're living a different life. It's one way to have a complex engagement with the world. It's guaranteed going to make your mind more nimble. So we get into this cosplay thing that begins as kind of a supportive narratives, right? There's some fan stuff, and then there's sort of fan support stuff, and people will talk about sort of some of the stuff that came up around early Star Wars and things like that. And now it's become something that really looks at all different types of narratives and sometimes blends them, right? Sometimes sort of blurs things between. Okay, so if we're born into interesting times, then why not become more interesting ourselves is my response. And I think that's exactly what needs to happen. I think what you want to fear, don't fear anything, but if you want to fear something, I would fear people trying to take control of cosplay and not leaving it as this kind of individual type of response to the world. You want to make sure that you don't end up sort of losing that. And that sort of spark of cosplay that's sort of growing, and it's growing around the world as we speak, is something that I see as a marker of what's basically going to be the next generation of sort of major entertainment forms. And certainly now there are sort of major cosplay clubs in that, particularly in Japan, that are packed all the time, that are fascinating. Okay, so how do you do this? How do you cosplay? Well, that's why I want to talk to you folks, because as you can see, I'm not really dressed very well. I never have really dressed very well. I'm usually the worst dressed person in the room, and I'm really the worst dressed person in this room. But I want to ask you, how do you do it? How did you get started? And what are the types of things that you do in order to make this work for yourself? There's other panels coming up. I'm going to host a panel, I think, on Sunday with some professional cosplayers. It's something you can do as a career, which I think is amazing. But we need to say, what do we do? And the thing is that so far, it's been very much a DIY with a sort of a network sort of connection type thing. which is, I think, an extraordinary thing. So here's the thing. The experts, when you look at sort of huge success that people talk about, an interesting thing that they come up with is you need to preserve your own type of pathway in the world. So in the world right now, it's really, really complicated. There's a million different messages, all kinds of things you want to be. What happens with cosplay is you're deciding for yourself who you want to sort of engage with, who you want to sort of emulate, who you want to explore as a character, instead of letting other people tell you what to do. Even the best actors only get to do what we tell them to do. Cosplayers do whatever the heck they want. That's an incredibly powerful thing, and it's an incredibly interesting thing. It's also really, really dangerous, right? You've got to have some sort of, here it's cool, but I mean, you already see if they're putting up signs saying don't sort of like harass people, that's clearly not a good thing. But to be in costume and go to the mall, for example, to be in costume and be out in public, to be in costume and be out there, I mean, people stop their cars, they're looking at you, you've created a huge impact. That's amazing. That's an extraordinary thing. I mean, we work our whole lives in performance to do that type of stuff. But what happens is, with performance, when the audience falls in love with a character, and they always do, right? I mean, people, you're talking about people's fantasies that you're bringing up, you're bringing to life in front of them. We have backstage and security. You're in cosplay, you're out there, right? You're out there sort of dealing with sort of live in the moment performance, which is extraordinary. So I always think of these two people because the people that sort of have led to the sort of the major revolutions in our society, one of the things that they've said is you should completely stay on your own. So Steve, I love this, it's a picture of Steve Jobs when he was giving the commencement address at Stanford. And they had this great new tradition of all these people giving commencement addresses at universities, but they themselves never graduated university. So if you want to be truly successful, come to university and then quit somewhere in between. Same thing with Jane Jacobs, who's the most important person in terms of creative cities. Same thing, go to university, take a couple of classes, and then get out of there as fast as you can. The message being, stay individual. The thing about cosplay is it's such an extraordinary example of personal artistic power. Personal creative power. Okay, so that's the thing. You got to head off on your own. You've got to take your own path, and that's a cosplay type thing, right? Certainly there's people coming together on it, but it's you doing your own show. Even when people go as friends to exhibitions, they're not often sort of like themed themselves together or anything. They can be from entirely different traditions. They can be doing entirely different things with identity. It's incredibly powerful. So you become the author, basically, of your own world if you do this. Again, that's an extraordinarily powerful thing, and we can demonstrate, we can hook your brain up and scan you, and we can demonstrate that your brain will end up getting sort of more and more powerful if this is the type of thing you're doing. Performing something is fundamentally different than watching it, right? So what happens is, since the beginning of time, we've used story in order to share information with one another. It's the operating system of the human mind. Okay? Everywhere around the world, we've never encountered a culture that doesn't use story as the primary way to share information. We don't have, like, you don't run into somebody that you haven't seen in a while and just begin running off a bulleted list. May, flowers, vacation. You don't do that. You use a narrative. And even when we describe mathematical discovery, we use narrative. What happens is when you engage with narrative and you start living it, it becomes this really, really fascinating and sort of complicated way of dealing with the world. It also puts heroes out into the world. I think it's a great thing for kids to be walking through these hallways and see heroes walking past them. That's a really neat thing. I spent about 10 minutes out front before we started here, and there was a little girl that got separated from her father, and a superhero brought her back to her father. Like, that's a terrifying memory, except it's saved by a superhero. And the thing is, we think of that as like, isn't it just great? But no, it's really important. It's really important. It's incredibly powerful if there's all of a sudden hundreds and thousands of people representing heroism and narrative and story and these complex sort of issues in our society. It matters a lot. Okay, so here's the guy. He's the guy. He's Joseph Campbell, right? So many of you may have heard of him. He studied basically all of world story. And he said that really what it boils down to is that all of the world has only one story. It's called the monomyth. It has certain steps. And what you can do is you can follow basically every narrative anywhere in the world and it will always match that. So this is the guy that George Lucas hired to come and sit at his ranch, and they made Star Wars, right? And what he did is they said, we'll do the hero's journey based on space, because they wanted to make it for that. Here's what Campbell said, what he had discovered in a lifetime of studying story, is that Everything that we do connects to the narratives that we engage with. Now, some people connect with religious narratives or myths or whatever they would be, but everything you do connects to those types of narratives. If you've got a friend who's obsessed with Superman or Batman or whatever it is, they're not obsessed with them because it doesn't connect somehow to their personality. But what Campbell talks about is the fact that everywhere in the world, in every society, using narrative is what allows us to grow and become heroes in our own life, to control our own lives, which is why we tell stories everywhere. It's the only way that you can actually grow up and learn how to deal with things, right? How are you possibly going to know how to deal with really challenging things in your life without using narrative? So Campbell said that the smartest people, if what you want to do is sort of achieve the greatest things you can in your life, are the ones that engage most deeply with narrative. So cosplay is this extraordinary occurrence where what's happening is all of the heroes from all of these things, because cosplay is from around the world and from different times, are standing up and walking out of the books, and they're walking through our streets. And I love that. I love that, and I think it's incredibly important. Okay. I did warn you I'm an academic. Okay, so here's the thing. This is my favorite saying in the entire world. Again, it's going to go back to the Greek philosophers. This is Aristotle. You are what you repeatedly do. My arm is actually getting tired from holding this, which is not very good when you're talking about heroes. You can't even hold up a microphone. I gotta get more protein. Okay, so here's the thing. If what happens is you show up here at the convention or you show up in my class and I say, okay, welcome, today we're gonna learn how to speak Spanish. What I do is we speak Spanish for about 15 minutes a day for, say, 6 weeks. And what happens is you get better at Spanish. Some people get really good, some people get medium good, some people get just a little bit better, but you all get better because you are what you repeatedly do. If what happens is you've shown up here to learn golfing, which would be a huge mistake because I don't golf, but nonetheless, I would train you in, whatever, golfing, hitting a ball with a stick. And we would do that for like 6 weeks. And what happens is we do it every single day. You get a little bit better, you get a little bit better, you get a little bit better, because you are what you repeatedly do. It's something that works everywhere. This is literally the mimetic hardwiring stuff in our bodies. What we do is we repeat actions and we learn them. So if you wanted to, we were going to become like a huge, really sort of coolly costumed softball team, we would come in, we would practice batting, we would do that every day. After 6 weeks, some would be really good, some would be medium good, some would be a little bit better. But no matter what, you'd be better because you are what you repeatedly do. If you're instituting in your life a practice of being a hero, of being a character, of engaging with narrative in a complex way, you're making yourself a way better human being every single time you do it. You are what you repeatedly do. It's not just, because we know forever, we've known that the type of stuff that you read changes who you are as a student and as a sort of a person in society and all these types of things. To already start then to be living it, to see what it's like to actually bring that out into the real world, that's an extraordinary thing. I mean, when we have actors and I put them in a show and they play a villain for a long time, we got to do serious work with those people to make sure that they're okay at the end, because you are what you repeatedly do. Right? There's whole narratives about people that have lost their lives after playing really tough characters. So think about what cosplay is. Cosplay is deciding to do something that is, in some ways, the most risky thing you could possibly do. You're going to become someone else. That's extraordinarily heroic, it's extraordinarily cool, and I think it's something that's really, really necessary. Okay, so what's that look like in practice? Well, first of all, one of the things that happens is, how do we sort of identify ourselves inside of these massive crowds? Because I keep talking about individualism, but you could also be at a sort of a cosplay event and you show up and it's like there's 9 other people dressed as the character you're dressed as, and you're like only the 3rd coolest, which is tough. But it's still a communal thing. I think that something in this is also really fascinating, is that I love the people at these types of conventions. I'm sure there's always some people that are bad people, that happens everywhere. But in a world where we're more and more connected, we also want to spend more time finding people that actually share our sort of interests. And so it's really cool to be able to find people that are interested in this type of stuff. I know a lot of the people that I've talked to about cosplay, their best friends are people they've met online through a cosplay interest and then met in different sort of cities around the world. And so it's this way of sort of connecting. It's a way of getting past what's called search friction. So it's this networked way of being. We live in a networked world, and what's happening is cosplay is making that network far more complex. Okay, so here we go. Cosplay basically is connected to ancient myth. We've had ritual practice throughout the world, and we've had actually times when people would do things like dress up like characters from the Bible, because the church understood that if people actually played those characters, their behavior would get better, because you are what you repeatedly do. This is a revolution, though. This is people taking over characters that they pick and playing them in the way that they want in costumes that they often build themselves, most often build themselves, or at least a lot of elements, and taking that into the world. That's an extraordinary thing. There's this huge sort of connection to individual psychology. We know with people, you know, whenever something really bad happens in the news, people say, well, what was that person reading? What were they playing a video game? Were they listening to? The reason is we know that there's this major connection. It's not a causal relation, but there is this major connection in the type of stuff that you're fascinated with. It's obviously a huge thing to do with creativity and community, and it's become this major sort of force because of that, which makes it really interesting for me. And the thing about it is that it's at its heart, what it is a transformation of performance. What happened is, like only really 25 years ago, the only people that were dressing up in costume were like kids on Halloween, people in film and theater, and then like the people that pretend to be cowboys during Stampede. But other than that, right? And now, cosplay, you're talking probably in the millions of people around the world that are dressing up. And they're dressing up for different events, and it's getting more advanced, and it's getting pretty impressive, and it's getting organized. And it's really, really, really fascinating. Okay, so here are the questions that I want to ask you, because I want to stop talking. As you probably can tell, I could talk forever. But what I'd like to do is ask you these questions, and you don't have to answer all of them, but let me ask them, and then you can sort of let me know what you think. So why do you cosplay? Because I'm sure that many of you have different reasons for doing it. Maybe some of you are not cosplaying right now. Maybe you're cosplaying as like your neighbor. You're dressed totally normal, but you're not your normal self, you're your neighbor's normal self. What are the important issues facing cosplayers today? I think that sort of those signs around here obviously indicate one. What have you learned from cosplay? What would you tell those who are interested in getting started? Because one of the things is so many people now want to get started in cosplay, and I get a lot of those types of emails. It's like, how do I get started? What do I do? So what would you tell those folks? And then what didn't I talk about with cosplay that I should have? Those are my questions to you. What do you think? Yes.
I think one way to help people get started is to start basic. Don't go into like a big, if you want to start cosplaying, don't cosplay as like Optimus Prime first year. Start something, buy like a tweet coat from the thrift shop and go to dogs or something simple like that. Work your way up to it.
Okay, so start simple. And start simple, and that's when you say start simple, it's starting simple in terms of costume, not necessarily character, because Doctor's complex character, but it's like, how do you, okay,
simple
cool.
Costume, but character is real.
Okay, fascinating, yeah.
I think when you start cosplay, it's easier to start as a character from a show that you're very, very obsessed with, so you know everything that there is to know about that character. Otherwise, it's hard to dress as that character, act as that character.
Yeah, and this is another one. As somebody who teaches acting, we have people that star in things that don't know characters as well as people that cosplay, right? Because they know everything, and that's it's terrifying for me also to be up here doing this, because I also know that I know less about all of this than everybody else in the room. So yeah.
Be wise with your spending money. So a lot of stuff might be really expensive, but it's usually worth like $50 more for Dre's makeup. That doesn't make you want to peel your own face off.
Yes, right, yeah. Spend the money on good makeup, because makeup can really hurt. I did the thing where somebody told me, the first time I wore full face makeup, somebody told me you got to put cold cream on there because the makeup won't come off. And I'm like, yeah, I'm a dude, man, I don't need cold cream. Oh my goodness, what a mistake. Use frickin' cold cream. Yeah?
The reason why most people cosplay is because it's fun and you can just let loose. And if you're and it's also really great because if you're the shyest person in your school, you can totally go cosplay someone like a really ego problem character, like Black Star from Soul Eater or someone like that. And you can just let loose and be an idiot. Or you can be the most wildest person ever, and you can cosplay someone really quiet, like Homura from Madoka Magica.
Awesome. And I know what you're saying. You're saying, can you please connect that to Renaissance history? Okay, I can. So what happens, right, is that in the Renaissance, when people were starting to do plays, Shakespeare and Marlowe and all those folks, people got nervous and they wanted to they made actors only be able to work in certain parts of the town, and they wouldn't let them go anywhere else. And it was usually on consecrated ground because they were nervous they were witches. Because the thing is, if you act, it demonstrates that our personalities are just these types of performances. And it's incredible if you realize that by adopting a different character, you can be a whole different person. There's no reason why you can't then adopt that character and go downtown and become the CEO of one of the oil companies, right? You just do your sort of, put a suit on over top of the sort of major stuff and hope no one notices the cape. Yeah.
More important is just about these cosplays is cost of the costumes and whatnot. We can go cheap and use that as a whole costume. Because if you go on the stage, you'll notice that it's like a 1,001 applause, and you won't get anything. But if you want to really, say, win the prize or something, you have to put a lot of money into it. And also on top of it, there is, and the second season has been approved, and it's got, was on Discovery Channel, and it's going to be back on Discovery Channel. It's called Heroes of Cosplay.
Right.
The people who professionally do that, and that includes Yaya, who had co-authored with this book, which says 1,000 incredible costumes and cosplays ideas. We talk about everything, anything, and then some.
Nice. Yeah, and I think that's huge. Sorry.
This is a very good book that shows a whole bunch of stuff and whatnot about all sorts of different stuff.
Great, thank you. And I think that's part of the thing too, is that there's the money thing can be helped a bit by getting tips from people who are more experienced, right? And so that's like that example, that book is great. Yeah.
What I learned from cosplay is even if you're cosplaying an evil character, like I was a Sith Jarnal last year, first thing I ever did, and you know, it's an evil character, but you still have these good aspects of them, like very passionate, they can be for their own things, or loving. I found it was really cool. You put yourself in some of those mindsets, even good aspects of bad characters.
Nice, yeah, I think that's fascinating. That's one of the things people talk about too, if you really want to get into the psychological side, is try and play different types of characters, and it gets you sort of better and better at the sort of connection to character. Yeah.
I've only been to two big conventions in my life, and the first one I did cosplay, and this one I didn't. But what I found when I was cosplaying the first time was that I was really uncomfortable in my cosplay before I went to the convention. I was really uncomfortable, and I thought, wow, I look so weird with blonde hair. But then when I went to the convention, I don't know what happened. I just felt like I was part of this thing that is so much bigger, and I just felt completely comfortable. And even though I didn't look like myself, I felt like more than myself.
Nice, yeah. Well, that's the thing. That's the sort of, I think that's the revolution, which is why, by the way, we should all get into costume and stay that way 365 days a year. We could, one week a year, we could all dress just like this. And then all of the rest of the time. Oh, I'm getting the warning that I have 6 minutes left. Yeah? Oh, I have 15. Oh, okay, great. Awesome. That's like 9 extra minutes. Yeah.
I've never done cosplay. I really would like to get into it, but I've written about it. I wrote a novella about it. And what I did with the characters that I was really interested in with cosplay was paying homage to something that you love.
Yeah.
So that was half the piece for the characters that do it. What I wanted them to do was dress up to pay homage to Super Mario Brothers. That's really what they wanted to do. And what the other part is that when you go out there into the world and you express yourself as part of something you love, and you see a reaction from people, and you see the same spark in their eyes about that memory they have about that character, it just perpetuates this happiness that you just want to feel yourself and share with the world.
Yeah, I think, and that's such an incredibly important point, right? Is that it's also folks have tough lives, and they turn to sort of narrative as a way to sort of engage with that. And you see out here in the hall when people run into somebody and they're so happy that character that they love is up walking around, and they're like, oh, will you like do this move so I can take your picture and stuff like that. That's beautiful. I think that's an incredibly that's a wonderful thing to give to the world. And I'm glad to hear that you're writing about cosplay too, because my big thing now is I want to do plays and films with characters from cosplay, but put them into other roles to sort of see, and because I just think that's an incredibly exciting sort of thing to sort of, yeah.
It's called the Coin Collective. Look for it. Buy it.
he's dropping a promo. Hi there.
I found the strangest thing when I started cosplaying was I found me really bad in crowds. Like I had to be paused before I could myself to them up. But when I put on a costume, all of a sudden the social anxiety just is gone. Because that character doesn't have that.
Yeah, that's the thing, and it's such an incredibly important thing. And so what I would tell you is, when we train performers to deal with crowds, we just get them to do something like this over and over and over again. And what happens is, in your regular life, that begins to change because you are what you repeatedly do, right? So it's literally, this type of work is so incredibly important for what happens in the rest of our lives. So yeah, sure.
So mine is too. Why cosplay? I cosplay for me because every day I go to a job where you're at a farm full of kids, you're a farm full of people, and you're expected to act a certain way, be a certain way. And I'm not that way. And the more I cosplay, the more calm I feel, the more included I feel. And the other thing I've learned from cosplay is that you're included. You're not there to be judged. No one's going to judge you if you're wearing $5 worth of cosplay or if you spent $2,000 on your cosplay. It's a community that just grows by leaps and bounds, and you're accepted for your fandom, for whatever you are passionate about.
Wow, that's beautiful. Thank you. That's amazing. And I think it's true. I don't think any of us are like this, right? Like, I mean, this. Lots of us are like this, like you're dressed. But that's the thing, is I don't think any of us feel like, I mean, could you imagine feeling like this? Jeans and a black t-shirt. This is my jeans and a black t-shirt. I'm middle-aged man. Hi.
Important issues facing cosplayers today.
Right.
I would say body types, race, and representation are extremely important. Often, our heroes don't reflect us. The heroes we see in the media, they don't reflect who we are, what we look like. And when we become those heroes, they can reflect us. They can reflect us. We can be what a hero looks like. And I think that's incredibly important.
Well, and that's a bunch of issues in one, and I completely agree. And I think that the thing about it is that once you do, the thing about cosplay being a revolution is it's saying, yeah, we're taking this over, right? So we like what you did with the character, but we're going to go this way. And so there's all kinds of exploration that can happen there. And I think you're right. That's one of the things, is that, I mean, you wouldn't have to cosplay if everything was just so perfectly done and all society was sort of working perfectly. But we look at films and we think over and over again, particularly when you think of stuff that is, you know, when you've got people that are really connected to a set of books or graphic novels or something, and then a film is made and people are like, oh, what did you do? And it's because often what they're doing is they're casting following this older tradition of something that was a sort of a more controlled sort of form of media. So I think all those issues are important, and I think luckily they can be addressed on a case-by-case basis. Yeah.
It's made a slight mistake where it was shown that it was based here locally on like a Canadian station. It was based on showing it instead of Discovery Channel.
Okay.
My mistake. But
And you can see it online too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I also downloaded it off the internet to like one of the torrents. I just Heroes of Cosplay torrent. You'll find it. The 6 episodes is very good. It shows you all sorts of things and what can go wrong. Because one of the episode, one of the people had an allergy, wore a wig that she was allergic to, but she persevered through the whole thing despite that she was about to, and a few times she was about to throw up. Unfortunately, she didn't. I think she did afterwards, but that was a
Okay, no spoilers. We want to watch that episode and see whether she gets sick or not. Hi.
The most important lesson about cosplay, which I haven't actually learned yet, is wear comfortable shoes.
Wear comfortable shoes.
And make sure you go to the bathroom, because I see some people who cosplay and they can't get out of the costume to the end of the day. Your live's going to be aching like crazy.
Way back there. Yeah.
Well, one of the issues that I feel faces cosplay is the social stigma. So if you were to dress up in costume on your way to an event, or you can be judged, or people say, why is this guy in costume? And that's one of the issues that needs to be overcome, is the social stigma of dressing in costume. Why people say, oh, this person is weird because they're dressing up like this and that. I just feel there should be at all in society.
Okay, and so here's the thing. You're absolutely right, but I think that the trick is that when human beings behave the worst is when they feel that their identity is threatened. And so human beings that are kind of going through the motions of trying to just like live their lives and like pretend like everything is fine, it's gonna be okay, I'm going to my job and stuff like that, and then you show up in costume, you remind them that life could be far wilder, far different, far more expressive, far crazier, far more authentic. And that causes people to get really upset. And forever, anywhere in the world, somebody who is different gets singled out because of that, because it reminds people. And so the people who are the most afraid are the ones that are the most dangerous when it comes to this type of stuff. Fortunately, I think, because cosplay is growing so exponentially, there's lots of people. And once you're in a large group, the scary people can just stay away. But you're absolutely right. And I don't think that'll change until we get a little further down the road. Right, but you're right. Stigma is brutal, but it's creativity and taking charge of things like that always freaks people out. Yeah, yeah.
One thing that I've noticed with a few of my friends when I tried to introduce cosplay to them was that they were scared that if they dressed like the characters that they wanted to, who wore more revealing clothing,
Right.
that creepy men or women would give them very negative, over sexual attention.
Yeah, this is a tricky one. I've had a bunch of people talking to me about this, and this is this thing. The question or comment was about if a person wears, if the character that they want to cosplay wears revealing clothing, and they don't want to cosplay that when they go out because they're nervous that some sort of pervy guy or pervy woman is going to sort of give you weird attention. Now, I can tell you, like, sort of objectively, one of the tricks is, the famous one that people talk about is from back in the old days, is the Princess Leia bathing suit thing. And so there's this whole generation of people that had this fetish, right, for Princess Leia and the bathing suit thing. And the thing is that they fell in love with her when they were like 8 and stuff like that, right? So it's not like they started, it's not like, I don't know that 8-year-olds are pervy, I don't know, but like I don't think they are, right? I think they're just sort of, but what happens is when you connect to something that resonates with somebody's heart so closely, you're going to get a profound effect. So that's a huge thing. So I think if there's a character, right, so if somebody's always been in love with whatever character, and they've imagined all this stuff, and then you show up as that character, it's a huge sign that says 5-minute warning. Look at that. That is awesome. That is the best 5-minute warning I've ever had. Way to go. Way to go. It's not like I could say, I didn't see the sign. I totally missed it. So the thing is, there's that. The opposite side of it is, I don't care what you're cosplaying as. If somebody is like being gross and stuff like that, they got to be kicked out, straight up, because that's no longer being part of the community, and that's no longer keeping. Part of the thing is the exploration of all these sort of really interesting ideas and things like that. And somebody that's doing that, we're not talking about fantasy and narrative anymore. You're just talking about yuck. Yeah, so I think that's a tough one, but I've heard the same thing from other people, that there are characters they want to cosplay and they don't do it. Why are you holding up again? I saw it the first time. Oh, for the picture. No. I was like, maybe I got a refresh on that. I got a minute back there. I got some merit points. Hi.
What I would tell first-time cosplayers is that if it's like their very first time, I would tell them if they're doing cosplay like a character, make a character that is like personally, like has your around your same personality for your first cosplay, and also has like easy costume. Because if you pick someone that you totally don't have anything in common with them, then it's going to be way harder for you than it would be if you had.
Right, so you pick something that's close. Yeah, and that's such an interesting thing too, because I love seeing the folks that go for stuff, like, so for, like, if I went for like Sailor Moon, right? Now, obviously that would be pretty weird, but at the same time, I love people that'll go for the big challenge, right? The cross-play and the age thing and the different sort of shaping and structuring and stuff. But I think you're right that to begin with, it's probably easier to do something that's pretty close to home, because it makes it easier on costume. Yeah?
I disagree. I say choose what you want to do and just go for it and trust your gut and have a good time, because that's what it's about.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so, and this is the thing, is that everybody's got to have their own sort of approaches. There's like a combat first thing. Can you, all three of you, just ask your question all at once?
Okay, so I have something to lead off first. So I think whatever you're really comfortable in, you look great in. Because like, if, let's say you're a guy and you want to dress up like a girl character, whatever, if you're comfortable like that, then you'll look fine. And if you're a girl, you want to dress up like that character, whatever, you're comfortable. And also, with the fact of dressing up somebody very different from yourself, it's usually a lot more fun to dress up as someone different you're comfortable with.
Yeah, like, so the simple one is like, so I live my life as like this, right? So if I could dress up as a woman and live as a woman, I'm going to be like, wow, life is totally different as a woman. right? Like literally, it would be something that would be a completely totally different experience. And so that type of stuff, it gives you like incredible possibilities, right? To try and dress up as somebody who's nothing like yourself. But there's also only so far you can go unless you've got certain levels of money. So yeah.
I think the main reason why everyone cosplays is it's a release. You can be someone other than yourself. You can be wild and open, or you can be yourself in a cosplay. That is one of the main things. Hand in hand with that, one thing cosplayers face as a challenge is ignorance. People who don't do their research and think, oh, well, that cosplay is, completely unrelated. You look back and like back issues of something and it's actually there. That's one thing. I've seen that quite a lot on the internet. You see people with these unique cosplays and think, oh, that's not right. You look back and it actually is.
Yeah. The judgmental thing is tricky, but it's one of the areas that I love about cosplayers is actually the attention to detail, right? To actually knowing the story and background. And I think the other thing I'd say about this thing of picking a character that resonates with yourself, there's loads of people. So again, I teach acting. So when you teach acting, there's this idea that the people that are great actors are these like really gregarious types of people. They're loud and stuff like that, and they're not. They're often extremely shy, and the only time they're comfortable is when they're acting. And I've got friends who are very quiet, and they cosplay, and they're huge, and it's weird, but I sort of feel like I know them better when they're like like it's a part of themselves that's screaming to get out, right? So yeah.
You should probably add into your, or to research on the subject or to expand on it, is the export. You talked about how you should know yourself, but you should probably also maybe add in something about exploring yourself or growing yourself, because not only do you like gain depth when you're cosplaying as new characters, if you do different characters, you're gaining depth in your life, in real life as a
Oh yeah, I absolutely believe that, and I teach courses exactly about that. So I do. I'm absolutely convinced that the use of narrative is the primary way that we develop as human beings. And
What was the last part of that comment you said?
so that I should include as part of my research, I should make sure that I pay attention to the fact that you can use cosplay to develop yourself, and that what happens is the self-development actually that is integrated into your everyday personality. Am I getting close to what you said? She's asking me to repeat it, yeah? She says that, yeah. She said it much better, but that was what I think it meant. Yeah?
The aspect of cosplay that I enjoy, and the reason I got into it, is the artistry and the craftsmanship. And, the characters are an aside, but for me it's the artistic,
Nice.
the final piece.
Right.
You can say, I made that. I made every detail
Right.
of that. And just art.
And this is a huge one, is that there's lots of people who, that's their primary thing, is the creation of it and the artistry of that and the precision of that type of stuff. And I know people that are big into cosplay that don't dress themselves, they dress others. Because that's what they're really, yeah, and that's amazing. Again, that's also sort of an incredibly and what a huge creative outlet, right? It's the same type of thing.
It's
So.
a meshing of your passions and an artistic outlet, and being able to learn skills like even welding and stuff that I would have no other way to learn that in this urban environment.
Yeah. When I was getting ready for this, I was interviewing one of the people I know that's a cosplayer, and she just finished university, and her big thing is that she's so glad she's done university so she can learn things that are really applicable to building better costumes. Right? We've been right in her way this whole time. Yeah?
I just think that while there's aspects like courage or heroism that celebrated, one of the most powerful things about cosplay is just realizing the potential for change. Because so often in our lives we might say, well, I don't want to get my hair cut like that because that's not how my hair looks. I don't want to try taking an sport because that's not something I would do. And we tend to really limit ourselves and define our characters or our own self very rigidly. And in cosplay, you're forced to, develop this whole new character and you try different characters, different personas. And I think just through actualizing that in an outward way, it's a good reminder for yourself that you can also choose to shape your own persona and pursue the things you want directly of yourself in the ways you want. And it's a really important reminder when so often the messages we get are the opposite.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely correct, and I greatly appreciate that. I think that we can take complete control out of what we do. And I think part of what connects to that is that it's not just how we perceive ourselves that we can put limits on ourselves, it's how others perceive us. Part of the thing is if you want to change and make a big change in your life, often your friends and family are the ones that are the biggest impediment because they love you and they want you to stay the same because they love you being just like that. And so it's not that it's out of anything negative, but it's often the people that are the ones that are closest to us that keep us much more narrow than we might like to be, right? So anyways, on that we have to end. They held up the big sign at the end to say end. Thank you so much for coming. Have a great conference. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Just a note, no one can stay in for the next panel. We've got people lining up outside for the next panel. So if you've been in, please go out. The next panel is Max Brooks. There is a lineup outside. I don't believe it encompasses the entire capacity of the room, so feel free to join it.
So up here?
That's what I think, because then,
So is this new? Oh yeah, that's good, yeah. So where is it's better if we sit over here and I'll sit.
Oh, are you up here?
Moderator.
Oh, okay.
oh, nice.
But they told me move aside and let him talk.
So do you work for
No,
You work for the Expo?
I'm a volunteer for that.
Yeah, so I'm just gonna.
If you want to put your stuff on the side here, you can like behind the screen. Feel free.
We're going to actually strike the screen.
Oh, you're striking the screen.
Yeah, he wants to move it. What I'll do is I'll just take it and bring it back here for like a second.
Oh, Max.
Okay, so Samantha, we'll get that, and then.
That's if you still want to move the screen up.
I don't know if he wants the screen or not.
Even if it's.
Okay.
Yeah, wait. No, wait. Who made the request?
This gentleman right here.
Well, this is
There's a chair right there.
Okay.
Oh,
well,
yeah,
done.
yeah, grab one of those chairs.
All prepped, so if you want to move it,
Okay.
always move it up very quickly and
Would
move it
this
back
be a
over.
decent shot here?
So we're really concerned about these VIPs line of sight here, right? Yeah.
If that's an issue, I've marked more where the screen is, so it's easy to see. Oh. And maybe just bring it back here, and bring it over here if we want. Other way. Here,
You can get this one.
back here.
Can we move it back so that it's just sort of good? Yeah. And I get you set up for 2 people on stage, water bottles for each person.
That is,
Good. And right here. Can you get a 2-shot or just one? You can move it in and out as well. Yeah, but for as the room fills up here would be nice.
yeah, we can. Do you want to just give me a hand here? We'll just slide this back.
Sure.
Okay. You see your foot there, you can just go behind it.
Yeah.
How's that?
Yeah, perfect.
So you see a taint.
Is that? Are you staying at home?
Yes. Scoop's gonna stay here.
Yeah, I'm not gonna
switch at some point.
Yeah, but I'll be. Oh, yeah. It's, I said that there was no flash.
Are you guys ready to start letting people?
That's how we've done it.
I know you're.
Yes.
Okay.
It's a Zoom.
Okay.
I'm just gonna open this door. I'm gonna start with the
Yeah, let's start this reloading, guys. We gotta slide it up. Yeah, I am door replacement. Okay, have fun.
Your camera's just right down the computer table over there. Yes, something with your hand.
Or just a discussion.
Max Brooks.
Pardon me?
Max Brooks. Hey, can you throw that stuff? Just throw that stuff. Can you move that chair on those 2 chairs? No, just put it on the chairs. That's where we need to sit.
So, this is VIP seating only, unfortunately, we're not allowed to open up, so you're allowed to start on there or right through here. So, please, make sure we got a lot of people, so, be ready when people sit all the way around. So yes, please have a seat. First 3 rows VIPs only. We've got a large crowd, so please use up all the seats that you can. We've got 3 spots here. I've got another 3 here. Oh, 4 spots. Okay, yeah. These 2
accent going through it.
He's very easy.
So I meant 10 questions on the deals.
You told me the other day that you would answer any question. You don't answer any question.
There's no Q&A.
You will answer any question.
We interviewed him yesterday. He said he'd answer anything. So I guess the question is active. We asked him some very interesting questions.
Get one of your whole phones.
It's better if he sits here or sits here.
Where's it coming in? Is it coming in on that side? There's stairs on that side? There's stairs on that side. Yeah, let's just sit on maybe the right side.
I need to ask him maybe before that.
All the microphones are on?
Testing.
got some extra seats here. So, all right. Who wants to sit up here? All right. All right. You want to come and sit up here? Thank you. All right. Excellent. Thank you. No. Just sit on down. There you go. I'll stand. What's your name?
Jace.
This is Jace, everybody. All right. So come on in, everybody. We're starting just a little bit early because we have a lot to get through, and I want to save a lot of time for your questions because to me that's much more interesting than what I have to say. So all right, we're going to talk about three things. We're going to talk about the Extinction Parade comic book series and the announcement of the new TV deal with that. We're going to talk about the new graphic novel, The Harlem Hellfighters, and Will Smith's movie deal with that. But first, we are going to deal with a giant Brad Pitt-sized elephant in the room. So let's get through that quickly. We don't have a lot of time, so I'll do the quick, short version of it. 2005, right book, World War Z. Oh my God, Leonardo DiCaprio wants to do it. Oh my God, Brad Pitt wants to do it. I love them both. Who's taller? I don't know. Okay. Wow. Brad Pitt wants to do it. Okay, awesome. 6 years later, movie comes out with the same title of the book. So now we'll backtrack a little bit. One of the many reasons I did not go off on the movie is because I made what's called a conscious choice to sell the movie rights. And when you make a conscious choice to do anything in life, you have to be responsible for the consequences of that choice. Now, if I were, say, Alan Moore, who did not own the rights to Watchmen, and then suddenly they make a movie of it, then I could go hog wild with that wonderful British profanity that Alan Moore does, because that's what happened to Alan. He didn't make a choice. He got a phone call one day, and they were like, "Hi, is this Alan Moore, the awesome legend who made comic books as important to Western civilization as literature? Yeah, this is DC and Hollywood, and you can suck it." Click. So that's fine for Alan to go off. Good for him. But for me, made a choice, can't say anything, fine, okay. So I was not involved, didn't write the script, didn't do anything, went to the set for one day, watched a lot of people run around, and it could have been called There's a Sale at Target, because there was no zombies, it was just people running. Okay, so then comes the trailer. Oh, are you guys having a problem hearing me in the back? In the back? Okay. Yes. Here we go. All right. Let's get this out of there. Trailer comes out. And I should say that I didn't even see it online. I saw the trailer on Entertainment Tonight. Now, let's for those who hasn't read World War Z, and it's all right. That's okay. Sir, what's your name? Winston. All right, Winston. Let me tell you. Oh, there. Okay. Now, Winston, you haven't read the book. It's all right. I wrote a book called World War Z, and the whole point of the book to me was I didn't want to just write a zombie adventure that, say, was like a small group of people, because that's been done, and I also didn't want to have like some sort of alpha male hero that saves the world, because I'm not into that, and I didn't want there to be some sort of magic bullet, because that's not how we solve real crises. So it was a series of interviews from survivors all around the world who come together and slowly and painfully reclaim our planet. Okay, so I'm watching Entertainment Tonight, and what do I see? Coming up, zombies attack and only Brad Pitt can save us. So, I get asked a lot from people, like, what's your advice for aspiring writers? And I will tell you this, the most important lesson I can tell any of you if you're going into any sort of artistic field is marry the right person. Because you need a wingman, you need a partner, you need someone who knows you better than you know yourself and will help you make the right choices. So for example,
after I saw the trailer, my wife picked up my jaw and put it back on, and she said, you need to contact Frank Darabont. Now, for those of you who don't know who he is, have you heard of a little TV show called The Walking Dead? All right. Well, what happened was many, many years ago, there was an awesome zombie indie comic called Walking Dead, which we all love, but let's not forget it was a comic book. And we as comic book fans are still in the minority of the human race. Well, this gentleman, Frank Darabont, who made Shawshank Redemption, said, I said, I'm going to turn this into a TV show. Nobody wanted it. Frank fought for it. He said, I'm going to bring in my cast, my crew, my writing staff. I am going to turn this into a phenomenon. And he did. And instead of rewarding him financially, maybe just even giving him a pat on the back, maybe, like what I would have done, give him a statue on the mall in Washington, D.C., next to Martin Luther King. Like, there'd be Dr. King, and then there'd be Frank. AMC fired him. Fired him after season 1. By the way, let him go to Comic-Con in San Diego and talk up season 2 before they fired him. He didn't know. He's like, hey, season 2 is going to be great. Come on down. You're all going to love it. Gets back to the set. They're waiting for him in a classic assassination. So my wife, Michelle, said, look, Frank has been through the ringer many times. He's someone you should talk to. So I wrote to him. I emailed him. And he emails me back and he goes, look, no matter what happens with this movie, you have your book. You have your side of the story. Trust me, it's a lot better than being a screenwriter and having your script mangled and then everyone thinking what's up on the screen is what you intended. I know what I'm talking about, Max. You're in a good place. So then Frank was even cooler. Frank actually sent my email to a friend of his who then wrote back to Frank and said, look, tell your friend Max, number 1, I read World War Z, I liked it. And number 2, tell him that no matter what happens with the movie, so many more people are going to be exposed to his book that never would have. And that's really why we're in this. It's to have our words read. All the best, Stephen King. So then I go, I see the movie, you know, I go there, the big red carpet, you know, everyone's asking me questions. Oh, what do you think? And I'm like, well, I haven't seen it yet. And then there's Fox News, like, what color is blue? And then I get there and I sit down and there's Mark Forster.
Hello, I'd like to thank all of you for being here. Especially Max Brooks, who wrote this wonderful book that I didn't read. Anyway, here's our film.
So I watched the film and here's what I'm going to tell you. Once the credits were done, I didn't mind it. You know why? Because it had nothing to do with my book. I thought I was going to be tearing my hair out. I thought I was going to be watching them ruin my story. They didn't ruin my story. They ignored it. So they gave me the gift of emotional distance. I wasn't Stephen King watching The Shining where I'm like, what? Scatman Crothers isn't supposed to get an axe in the chest. He's supposed to save them. What? I wasn't Tolkien's ghost watching The Hobbit. Once the credits were done, I got to watch 28 Days Later on crack. I thought it was great. You know, okay, that's cool. Oh, Brad Pitt making pancakes. Hi, honey. And hi, middle-aged women who fell in love with me a long time ago and are still with me. Who, by the way, that was the core audience. Believe me, that was the greatest work of middle-aged married female pornography I'd ever seen. 50 Shades of whatever ain't got nothing on World War Z. I mean, not only does he have to fly around the world and save the world, he has to call his wife every day to check in. I turned to my wife. I was like, Michelle, did you write this part? So World War Z. So that's where we are. I saw it. Good for them. They're going to make a sequel. The Battle for More Money. Good for you. Moving on. Okay, so that happened. Now I've moved on to other things. Okay, I moved on to a new comic book series that we're 5 issues through called The Extinction Parade. That started because I had written a short story many years ago called The Extinction Parade. William Christensen at Avatar said, hey, how would you like to farm it out and we can develop it into a comic book series? You wouldn't have to do anything. Now, I've never had that offer before, so I was like, hey, cha-ching, or rather in the comic book world, ching. But then I started to get the scripts back, and I realized it was really good, but it wasn't me. So I started making notes, and my notes became rewrites. And then I just said, we have to pull the gears, stop the show. I have to go back and rewrite everything, and I have to be the writer on it. Because if it's got my name on it, it's got to be me. So now let me tell you a little bit of what Extinction Parade is. I should start by saying, how old are you, young man?
11.
All right, you're 11. I'm 41. I'm about to be 42. I know that's like crazy. I should look like Gandalf, right? With the when you get older, you're going to realize that one of the most important things about young life is to have challenges. I didn't really understand that till I was older. Now that I am older, I see the guys my age who, when they were your age, they didn't have to struggle. Everything came easy to them. They were coddled. Everything was cool. They were at the top of the food chain. Now they're my age, and bad stuff's starting to happen, and they have no survival skills. So that's why I wrote Extinction Parade, because I wanted to talk about what it means to have the psychological and the emotional survival skills to deal with crisis. Because I thought, what if there was a species that lived at the top of the food chain, had never needed to struggle, had never needed to adapt, had never failed and learned from their failures? Because let's think about us, right? We're in an artificial cave with an artificial sun. We're the dominant species on the planet. We're not supposed to be. 9/10 of our evolution was this. We were saber-toothed cat bait. We were weak. We weren't very fast, very strong. We didn't have claws, nothing. But we overcame that, and we clawed our way up to the top of the food chain. And that's left us as an extremely resilient species, which is what I talked about in World War Z. So I thought, what if there had been a species that had never had to go through those trials by fire, never felt small or afraid, never felt weak? Oh my God, they're not ready for anything. Well, to me, that species is vampires. Because when I was a kid, everybody wanted to be a vampire. They were cool and sexy. And this is before the sparkling virginal type. You know? So I thought, wow, as resilient as humans would be to a zombie crisis, vampires wouldn't. So what we start is this group of vampires that initially think a zombie outbreak is awesome, because they get to watch human society crumble, and for a while they've been hemmed in by human society. Especially for me, the rise of the middle class has been the worst thing for them. The notion that average citizens have worth, that you can't just kill whoever you want, that everybody now has like a credit card and a job and a boss who's gonna like call the police on Monday if they don't show up. What? That's crazy. So they hate this. So when society starts to crumble, for them it's like Mardi Gras. They're like, oh, this is awesome. And we better kill as much as we can, as fast as we can, before the humans put their house in order. And then one vampire makes the horrible conclusion, the humans are not going to put their house in order, because we're not talking about the end of human civilization. We're talking about the end of humanity. And when that humanity dies, what are we as parasites going to feed off of? Because we are parasites. We don't invent, we don't produce, we don't contribute, we do nothing. And we have a history of doing nothing. So the Extinction Parade, every issue is a journey of self-discovery of vampires, when they're starting to realize that all their supposed strengths actually turned out to be their weaknesses. Because it was those strengths that lulled them into their arrogant softness. Can they adapt in time before there's no more humans? Can they do what needs to be done? Can they get through all their prejudices and all their arrogance before it's too late? That's the Extinction Parade. So that's what I've been working on. Now, for those of you who read online over the last 48 hours, let me clear up what's been going on. For those of you who haven't, there's been all these articles about how the Extinction Parade is coming to TV. We don't know that. There is a production company which has optioned the television rights, so we're going to get together, we're going to try to pitch it around to networks, see who likes it, and if they do, then it will come to TV. So that's where we are right now with the Extinction Parade. Now, my next and final project I'll talk about before I open the floor to questions, I've been working on for 15 years. I started working on it at the same time I started working on Zombie Survival Guide. And it's not zombies, it's not vampires, it's a true story. In 1917, during the Great War, the war to end all wars, or as you up here call it, the war the British dragged us into, the United States government set up one of its own units to fail. And that's because they were African American. They gave them poor training, they gave them poor equipment. They sent them to the Deep South hoping there would be a race riot, so that then it would be disgraced and not be sent overseas. And when that proved futile, they did send them overseas to dig ditches. And then when they protested, they gave them to the French. And why that was the final insult was because when the United States entered the war, the British and French armies were like, yes, American replacements. And General Pershing said, he was our commander-in-chief, he said, absolutely not. As Supreme Allied Commander of the American Expeditionary Force, I will tell you American forces have to fight under a unified American command, under an American flag, under an American general, ... except for the black guys, you can have them. So they were given to the French, hoping that they would either fail in combat or never even see combat. Well, the truth is they spent more time, 191 days on the front line, longer than any other American unit of any color. The first American war hero of the Great War was one of these guys, Henry Johnson, who took on 20 Germans with a knife. The entire unit ended up winning the French Croix de Guerre. And at one point during the Kaiser's offensive to take Paris, there was nothing in that sector between the Germans and Paris but these guys. Oh, and as a side note, they also introduced jazz to France. Their regimental band was led by a guy named James Reese Europe, who was a mega celebrity of the time. He walked into any club, any restaurant in New York, people would just stand up and cheer and get autographs. He was a mega star, and he gave all that up to take his music to show the Europeans that we as Americans were a nation and had our own culture. By the way, he also said, when the shooting starts, I put down my baton and I get in combat. That's unheard of nowadays. That would be like Kanye going to Afghanistan. That is the story of the Harlem Hellfighters. Now, one last footnote about it is, as a final sort of insult to them, the American government wouldn't let them march off to war. And that's the most basic honor you give to soldiers. Basic. A soldier, when he puts on or she puts on a uniform and they march off to maybe get killed, they have to know that their country's behind them. They have to know that they're loved and they're supported. And so in New York City, all the New York National Guard units formed into what was called the Rainbow Division. And they all marched off to war, except for these guys as New York National Guardsmen. They were not allowed to march in the Rainbow Division because they were told, and I'm not kidding, black is not a color of the rainbow. That's how much they were humiliated. Well, they ended up coming home as heroes despite everything the US government did to try and stop them. They came home to a victory parade up Fifth Avenue in New York where over 1 million New Yorkers of every color turned out to welcome them home. That's the story of the Harlem Hellfighters. Yeah, I know. Now, 15 years ago, I tried writing it as a script, as a movie. Nobody wanted it. And I was about to give up. I was, because when you're a young writer, you blame yourself. You think, well, they don't want it because it's me. And I was ready to shelve it for good, and I had one final meeting with LeVar Burton. Yeah. And he said, this is a great story, you shouldn't give up. And then he said something that I don't even think he knows how important that was to me. He said, there are more than a few Harlem Hellfighters scripts making the rounds in Hollywood right now, but yours comes closest to the truth. Now, let me backtrack and say that when you grow up dyslexic, and you have a horrible learning disability, and you don't get along in school, and you have to struggle every day and get tutored every night just so you can get a passing grade, and then Geordie LaForge tells you you've done your homework? Wow. There is no greater compliment I could have gotten. So because of him, I never gave up, and I stuck with it. And finally, when I got into writing comic books, I realized this is a great way to tell a visual story without having to worry about the economic bullcrap that is Hollywood, because that's the first thing Hollywood does. They say, well, what's this going to cost? And they go, oh my God, just black people? No, that's cute. Anyway. So I thought comics, perfect. Now I had just done World War Z at the time. Random House was very excited. They were waiting for my next book, and they said, what's it going to be? Hoping I was going to say, World War Z Part 2, The Search for More Money. And I was like, no! I want to do a true story from World War I that no American has ever heard of, in graphic novel form, starring black people. And I heard something on the phone. I go, what is that? They go, oh, sorry, a pin just dropped. Now, because I had hit so hard with World War Z, they thought, well, let's give it to him, kind of the way they let Scorsese make Kundun, so then he would give them Casino. I think they were like, well, let's let him do this, so when he does come up with World War Z Part Cash, then we can have it and he'll like us. So I teamed up with Kanan White, an amazing artist, and through Avatar. I don't know if you guys know Avatar. Avatar and I are also doing Extinction Parade together. Now, let me just say one thing about why I love Avatar comics so much. It's because of this man, William Christensen, who is Avatar Comics. And you'll see him if you go down to the Avatar booth. He looks like Peter Griffin. And I remind him of that constantly. But I call him the last shoemaker in a world of shoe factories, because so many comic book companies now are essentially becoming pre-movie companies, and all they want is their movie deal, and so they're designing their comic books so it will fit better into a Hollywood format. William doesn't do that. William is a genuine comics nerd, and he loves working with people like Garth Ennis and Alan Moore, and he loves discovering talent, and he loves the comic book, and he doesn't care if it gets made into a movie. The only reason he likes those is that it brings attention to the comic book, but that's what he cares about. The man's a freaking paper nerd. He likes to tell me about the paper it's printed on. I'm like, William, I love comics too, but just the paper. He's like, no, this is the new special DRX5 made from trees fed with the milk of the Khaleesi. And so I teamed up with them. Now, remember, the reason I did a comic book was I had turned my back on Hollywood. Screw it. You know what? Enough with you, Hollywood. I'm going to do it as a comic book. I'm happy. 2 weeks before the book comes out, I get a call. Will Smith's production company wants to try to turn it into a movie, and they want me to write the first draft of the script. So that's where we are with Harlem Hellfighters, and that's where we are with Extinction Parade, and that's where we were with World War Z. So now I'm going to open the floor to questions. If anyone has them, or if anyone needs to rush off and see Sons of Anarchy like these young men. That's all right, go. No, yeah, that's fine. No, go, run. Give them my regards. Oh, thank you. I seem to remember many girls saying that as they left.
I love you, though. We can still be friends.
Anyone have any questions? Yes. Yes. Let me talk about this for a little while. One other advantage of the World War Z movie getting made is finally Random House put up the cash for me to make a complete audiobook. Because I should tell you, see, usually what they do with audiobooks are like the bastard stepchildren of the book industry. They really don't want to acknowledge them, and they give them almost no money, so they usually hire one guy to do a million little voices, okay? Because that's cheap. You can only hire one guy for the day. And it'll be things like, Comrade General, the tanks are stalling and NATO is counterattacking, said the general. That's what they do. Now, I wanted to do the World War Z audiobook with a full cast, because also, being dyslexic, I grew up on audiobooks. I actually probably wouldn't have passed high school had my mother not taken my reading list every year and brought it to the Braille Institute for the Blind and had those books read onto audio cassettes so I could listen to them. So I've always loved audio cassettes, and I've always wanted to do it as a big audiobook. So they said, we'll meet you halfway. So we did 6 hours. And for years and years, people came up to me and they said, oh, when are you going to do an extended? I said, I don't know. So it was Random House. And they finally said, yes, we will do it. So I got a chance to cast all the other voices that had been left out. And I wrote to everyone, and I called people that I could. We got Nathan Fillion, who, by the way, goes to such a dark place. You're gonna be like, this is not the guy from Firefly. And this certainly ain't the guy from Slither. Believe me, this guy goes dark. You will not recognize Simon Pegg. Simon Pegg, who does an American accent. Oh yeah, we got Denise Crosby and Bruce Boxleitner and Jerry Ryan and Masioka. We just went on and on. Now, some people I had to really reach for, and like I said, I wrote to everyone personally. I don't know if you've heard of an actor, F. Murray Abraham. He won the Oscar for Amadeus. Now, I was told I couldn't get him. They said, look, he does audiobooks and he don't roll out of bed unless it's a small fortune because he's that in demand. So I wrote to him and I just told him how I felt from the heart. I said, Mr. Abraham, when I was a kid, my mother bought me the audiobook of Red Storm Rising. And you read all those parts and you were amazing. And you showed me how good an audiobook could be. And I probably would not be doing this project right now had you not helped inspire me. So he wrote back and he's like, I'll do it. So that was amazing. And I got to be in the booth with some people and everybody was so good to work with. Common the rapper, God bless him. He reads the dog handler part. And as I'm reading, I realized, oh my God, Random House has Xeroxed the wrong book. They Xeroxed the earlier version where the words are different. So we literally had to like Xerox my book so he could read it. He was like, hey, it's all right, no problem. I'm like, oh my God, thank you. So that is the World War Z audiobook. It's now full. You can't say unabridged because some words in the original ones were edited. So legally you can't say unabridged, but it is complete. It is the complete 12-hour World War Z audiobook. Anyone else? Yes.
Well, with Bruce Campbell being here, can you tell me how Max Brooks would out-survive him, other than the fact that his weapon runs on gasoline and bullets?
Outsurvive him in what?
In a zombie.
Dude, we're talking about two different enemies. My zombies are slow and dumb and walking viruses. His are the Book of the Dead. So you need the Book of the Dead. Now, if you read the Book of the Dead to my zombies, they wouldn't care. Anyone else? You have one? Yes.
What inspired you to write the zombie survival guide?
All right, this young man asked me, what inspired me to write the zombie survival guide? Fear! I was very scared of zombies when I was a kid. I was terrified. I'll tell you. All right, you know what? I'll tell you guys how I got into zombies. I've told this before, and of course, it has to be the 11-year-old kid who asked me this. You're 11. When you turn 12, maybe 13, strange new things will happen to your body. And the first thing you should know is it's completely normal. Jesus still loves you. It's okay. But you may start to notice girls in a way you've never noticed before. I liked that his mom just said that. With pride, no less. Oh, he's way ahead of you. Well, all right, when I was a little bit older than you, but here's one thing he doesn't know, okay? In his generation, he can see what he wants to see on the computer and on his phone, whereas when I was his age, we had a new rating in movies called PG-13. Now, PG-13 meant that the young women could just take off their shirts at any opportune moment, and it had nothing to do with the movie. We had movies like Police Academy and Stripes, and suddenly there was a shower scene. So when I was your age, I used to watch something called cable TV. My parents would be out, and I would be waiting like a sniper, like, dug in, waiting to see something awesome. And sometimes it didn't work. One time I read the cable guide, and there was a movie called Hot to Trot, and I was like, yeah. And it was a talking horse movie with John Candy and Bobcat Goldthwait. But one time, I was watching, and there was a woman who was completely awesome from the neck down. And I thought, I mean, just Allah be praised. I was so happy. But then I realized that she had wandered, as I had wandered, into a zombie cannibal movie in which they used it was Italian, so they used real documentary footage of cannibalism in New Guinea. Yeah. So when you're 12 or 13 and your biggest worry is hair growing in weird places, which are actually not weird, it's totally normal. And that's your biggest worry, and suddenly you're watching flesh being eaten, and you don't know where the documentary ends and the zombie stuff begins. That leaves a mark. So I was what we call traumatized, and I always used to think, what if there was a zombie outbreak? But I didn't want it to be like the movies, because what I understood growing up in the movies, where both my parents were famous. My mom was an actress named Anne Bancroft, and my dad's a guy named Mel Brooks. And so I grew up in Hollywood, and I know how movies are made. And what I learned about movies being made is they don't necessarily do what's right in a movie or what's educational. They do what's cool and what's fun to watch. And so I realized in all the zombie films I watched, everybody made bad choices, and none of it was really practical. I thought, well, how would I really survive? Now, growing up in Southern California, I was always ready for earthquakes. We had earthquake drills, and so survivalism was part of our culture, disaster preparedness, I should say. When you say survivalism now, it's like those doomsday prepper losers, who actually want this to happen. Did you see that show, Doomsday Preppers? There was one guy, he was like, I'm gonna build myself a spider hole. Yeah, and they gonna take over my house, and I'm gonna creep out of my spider hole every night. I'm gonna come and kill one of them every night. Yeah. And I realized that guy's not waiting for the apocalypse. He's legitimately going to sell his house to somebody, and then he's going to come back. So I realized if there was a zombie apocalypse, most people would probably die from things that are not zombie related. They'd die from dehydration, they would die from exhaustion, they'd die from starvation. So I thought, I'm going to write a book for me about how you'd survive a zombie attack. So that's how I wrote Zombie Survival Guide. Anyone else? Yes, sir.
So I think you mentioned that Harlem Hellfighter is being cut by Will Smith.
Yes.
So this might be an awkward question, but can you keep Jaden away from that?
What is your problem with Jaden? She's awesome. Did you see Low Down Dirty Shame? Did you see Nutty Professor? She was great. Look, I think Will Smith married well. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes they marry a one-legged model that hops into their life and hops out with half their money. What's? Oh, the son? Oh, look, the son was, who am I to judge the son of a famous man? I hope he is in it. And I hope he is awesome in it. And I hope everyone says, wow, what a great performance. In fact, sons can be even more talented than their fathers. Anyone else? Yes, in the way back. Yes, Dr. Baltar. Look at him. Doesn't he look like Baltar? I mean, other than the cap, but your hair, and yes, sorry, go on, Dr. Baltar. Are you kidding? Was I expecting? No. I wrote it for me. I didn't even expect it to be published. I don't expect anything to be successful that I do. Look, if I had any inkling of what is successful in popular culture, you think they would have fired me off Saturday Night Live? I'd still be there, which, by the way, for those of you who don't know, yes, I was hired, Saturday Night Live. I was like, yay, hooray, made it. It's August of 2001 in New York. What could possibly go wrong? Yes. So we survived that. We survived anthrax in the building, but they didn't survive me. So eventually I got the call. By the way, I was fired from SNL on my honeymoon. Somehow they ran a transatlantic cable to Manihi Atoll in the middle of the South Pacific, and I just got, "Hello, Max, it's Lorne Michaels. You can suck it." So I don't know what is successful. I don't know. I write from my heart. For God's sakes, I just wrote a World War I story that's a true story. It took me 15 years to research, when everybody told me nobody wants it. So clearly I'm stubborn and dumb. Yes?
My question has to do with World War Z. It has to do with the fact that you sold the movie rights to Brad Pitt and company. Does that mean that there's no hope with the great story that you wrote? And I mean, it was one of the best books
thank you.
I've ever read. Will never get reproduced the way that you had meant and you had written it, because I just loved every part of it. There's not a part that
Oh, thank you.
I've read it 3 times, and I don't read books twice.
Well, thank you. Look, you never know. You never know. We shall see. Look, they're making a sequel. Maybe it'll be close to the book. I don't know. Maybe it'll be The Search for More Pancakes. I don't know. I'm just happy that I've got my book and nobody can mess with it. Well, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else? Yes, in the hat.
Is there any chance that you still have the rights to your book, maybe turn it into a comic book or a longer?
Oh yeah, I could totally do that, but the thing is, like, I would want to include more stories. I don't want to just milk the cow. Look, if I were a better businessman, I'd be on, not only would I be on World War Z Part 7, I would be farming out a whole line of World War Z Jerry Lane action books. I mean, that would just be like a money tsunami. And sure, I could make a ton of cash if I just converted it into a graphic novel, but I want to give readers more. I don't ever want to be accused of just milking it. I want to know when you buy something with my name on it, you know that I've busted my ass. And that's really important, which includes putting more stories in. I'm not saying I won't do it, but right now my plate's obviously kind of full. I mean, for example, like for Harlem Hellfighters, the research I did with that, when you stack the books up, it's 4 feet high. 4 feet high worth of books, and a foot of those books is literally just art that I had to give to Kane White so he could make sure all the illustrations are historically accurate. Because when you're doing a historical comic book, you got to make sure you do your homework. Hairstyles, clothing, weapons, uniforms, buttons, oh my God. So that takes a lot of work. And plus, I've got, I think, 10 more issues of Extinction Parade to write. Which is, and like I said, going back, this is really, really important for me to get the psychology of Extinction Parade correct. You know, the blood, the gore, that's fine, but that's not why I wrote it. I didn't even write it about zombies and vampires. I write it about struggle and about the pitfalls of privilege. You know, as a parent with a 9-year-old, I see what's happening to kids. I don't know about in this country, but in my country, you know that when 2 kids' soccer teams play each other, they both get a trophy. So nobody gets their feelings hurt. And now as a 40-year-old, I know people who are hiring 20-somethings who can't take criticism. They've never taken criticism. When I was in my 20s, I got my ass kicked by just mean bosses and jealous coworkers and crappy jobs, get coffee, answer the phone. Oh my God, I was working on a sitcom as a production assistant once, and thank God this didn't happen to me, it happened to my fellow production assistant. The star of the show, she was like, give me a cup. Here. That's your 20s. But now there's a whole crop of 20-somethings, at least in my country, who are just like, hey, I've never been talked down to, I've never been yelled at, I've never had to be told to go do my work again. There are 20-somethings going to job interviews with their parents. Yes! There are 20-somethings, there are teens in college who make their parents call the professors to get them a higher grade. God, let the Chinese not know about this. Because there will be tanks rolling up Constitution Avenue. I heard they remade Red Dawn. I haven't seen it. Maybe in this new version of Red Dawn, they call their parents. It's struggle. It's getting your ass kicked. It's life being hard. There's a great expression I read. You want to make a man's life hard, make a boy's life easy. That's my vampires. Spoiled and coddled and believing themselves to be invincible. And then slowly, issue by issue, they come up against their limitations. Oh my God, The humans that we've been looking down on are actually what we're trying to be, because they're the ones who have a better chance of surviving than us. So that philosophy, that psychology is what keeps me going. And so I can't just phone it in. Anyone else? Yes, in the way back. Yes, Miss Purple. Oh, I'm sorry, you're waiting for what, the Orphan Black or... I will say hello to my dad. Thank you. And because I'll tell you a quick story about my dad. When my little boy was about 18 months, he was just learning to talk. And my father would come over. My dad has this little cute trick he does, like on talk shows, where he puts a comb underneath his, his mouth, his nose. It looks like a Hitler mustache. And he goes, "Heil Hitler, Heil Hitler." My son loved it. He thought it was just so cute. And he was giggling. He didn't know. He was giggling. And my wife's like, "I'm not sure if that's the best thing that we should be doing." And I was like, "Honey, come on. It's a joke. I mean, what's the worst that can happen?" Well... 2 weeks later, we're all watching the History Channel, and Adolf Hitler's on there, and my little boy goes, "Grandpa!" Hitler has been banned from our house, and my dad is still trying to undercut me. My son just did his oral report about notable Americans, FDR, and he was rehearsing for us. Nothing to fear but fear itself. And then he just went, "Whoa, my polio!" And he fell on the floor and he goes, oh, I have eye polio now. "Oh, my wheelchair went off the cliff. Oh, dead, wah, wah." And I'm like, "No, you can't do that for your class." And my dad's like, "Why can't he? It's gold. This is great. This is hysterical." Any other non-Hitler related Mel Brooks questions? Yes, in the back with the hat.
Is you possibly working on any more projects at all?
My dad? He's doing a one-man show in a week at the Geffen. So let's check it out. Anyone else? Yes.
One of my favorite stories in your book is about Paul Rediker.
Yes.
I was wondering what your inspiration was.
My inspiration for Paul Rediker was two things. Number one, I based it on two historical facts. First, when the Soviet Union was invaded by the Nazis, they pulled back to the Ural Mountains, and they left everybody there at the mercy of the Nazis. Anybody who couldn't run, that was the end of them. So that was pretty Rediker. But also, when I was a kid, I saw a documentary of kids my age and your age, white kids learning how to shoot, being taught mandatory gun practice for when the black hordes would rise up and eventually kill them. And I thought if there was ever a sick, paranoid society that could produce a Paul Rediker, it would totally be apartheid South Africa. So that's where the Rediker plan came from. Anyone else? Yes.
Hate to go back to your dad again, but I'm just curious. Did you have any struggles, particularly writing stuff involving zombies, horror-related thriller, just because your dad was such a famous comedian?
Did I have struggles? No, I wrote it. Did the world have struggles accepting it? Have you seen what section of the bookstore Zombie Survival Guide is in? It's in the frickin' humor section. And I didn't make my job any easier because when I happened to be on SNL, I happened to win an Emmy. So, Random House didn't know what to do. So they're like, "Oh, from the Emmy Award-winning SNL son of Mel Brooks, this funny parody of zombies." And nobody knew who I was, so I'm sure everybody had this preconceived notion, oh, here's Mel Brooks's brat, and he's pissing on something that we love. And I had to go do, once again, my wife was like, "You need to pound the pavement, you need to talk to Fangoria, you need to start doing interviews, and you need to convince zombie nerds out there you are one of them. You are not making fun of them." And she's like, "Believe me, I've had to live with you and hear about zombie plans. You better get it out there." And the truth is, look, I'm always having to disprove. Because when I wrote Zombie Survival Guide, I had to disprove SNL. When I wrote Harlem Hellfighters, I had to disprove zombies because I've hit so hard in the zombie genre. Everybody loves my zombie work, so they're expecting another zombie book. No, I'm going to write a true story about a group of American heroes of which I believe their worst crime was not their humiliations and the beatings and the Jim Crow. The worst thing was history burying them. You know, I had a professor who once said to me, the worst crime that white people ever did against black people was to bury their history and bury their accomplishments. And that really struck me because I thought, wow, you can't face the future unless you have the confidence of the past. That's the same thing with Extinction Parade. As a Jew, I can tell you half our holidays are spent reminding ourselves what we've accomplished in the past so we can face the future. And so I thought, I love this story and it needs to be told. And hopefully people will love it. But I guarantee you there's going to be a lot of zombie fans out there that are going to look at this thing and be like, where the hell are the zombies? Come on, zombie boy, where are the zombies? Yes. Yes. So my favorite authors, all right, Tom Clancy. One of my favorites, being dyslexic, I didn't pick up a book and just buy a book and start reading until I was 16. And Red October was amazing because Red October got rid of all that Ian Fleming crap about macho men going around the world and having sex and not getting venereal diseases and gadgetry. Tom Clancy was real. Here's how a real Russian sub works. Here's how the KGB works. Here's naval tactics. I left that book, I left all his books feeling smarter than when I went in. And that's what I try to do. I hope people learn as well as are entertained. So I love Clancy, I love Farley Moat. Oh my God, have you guys ever read Lost in the Barrens? Wow. That's one of those books where I'm just like, I was so sad when it was over. I'm like, I'm gonna give it a year, try to forget it, and then go back and reread it. I mean, it was amazing. It was like Minecraft before there was Minecraft. These two young kids lost up in the Arctic, and they have to learn how to survive the winter. Wow. I love Hunter S. Thompson. Oh my God. I loved Homer. I loved his story of the Iliad and of the Odyssey. I read the Odyssey when I was camping in Greenland by myself. Really smart. Don't go camping in Greenland by yourself. See? I did you a service. You know, I love any author where the passion is obvious, and that's what's so important. And I don't care if my authors stick to the same genre. I don't care what they do. But when I feel an author is just trying to crank out a buck, when they've hit and they just keep going, that's when I sort of tune them out. I'm like, that's, you know, whatever. If you're not into it, why should I be into it? But when an author writes something and you just feel their passion coming through, oh my God, I love it. So I think we have time for one more question. Yes, sir.
What's your phase one of your personal zombie squad?
Oh, you want to know what my super secret zombie survivor plan is?
Yes.
Perfect question. Next question. Anyone else? One quick, yes, young man.
Why don't go camping by yourself in Greenland?
Here's why you don't go camping. Good question. Good question. Because you could die. Because, what's your name, young man? Liam, the reason we created societies initially, when we were all cave people, you know, millions of years ago, or if you live in my South, thousands of years ago, the reason we created societies is so we could help each other and we could specialize. And so if somebody falls and breaks their ankle, they don't have to crawl a mile to the river to get a drink of water. Somebody could help them. Or if they get sick, somebody could hunt for them. You know, we can't survive on our own. We need each other. One of the greatest survival mechanisms, these weak little monkeys that we are, what we created was the community. And that's another thing in this Extinction Parade, why my vampires don't even have a community. They don't think they need it. They're all what's called narcissists. It means like they're all in it for themselves. And they think that's cool. I'm in it for myself. They don't realize that humans band together because we need each other. And when we're together, we can do anything. And when we're alone, we can die. Liam, thank you for closing out the night. Everyone, I'm signing over at the Avatar booth right now. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you and enjoy the rest of the show.